Well, had a good lunch?
Yep.
You ready for some more exciting tech stuff?
Yes.
You ready to be absolutely turned on again? Come on, who got turned on last night? Who thought it was sexy last night? Who thought I was sexy last night? Fortunately, a few head shaking there. Okay, so just a very brief talk today, really to follow on from yesterday. So, who here has, just to get some idea, is already in business right now? Put your hand up, in some form. A few people? Okay. Who here wants to be in business? Worth looking into business because do you realise that the Rich 200 list, almost every one of them on that list, have made their money mainly through business and been investing? Who finds that interesting? So, very worth, if you want to build serious wealth, looking into business in some form. So today, just in the brief time I've got, I'm just going to cover a little bit more of the basics and more advanced strategies on tax minimising and asset protection. Just a few keys, just a bit of a refresher, but a bit more advanced stuff just to be aware of with your structuring. I'm going to do a brief introduction to something that we're going to be doing next year, which is your legal rights. So remember yesterday I spoke about like parking tickets and speeding fines and handing debt collectors and all that kind of stuff? Who'd be interested to know a strategy that can stop bullying in your school for your child within 24 hours? For example, stop your child being bullied within 24 hours. Which parent would be interested in that one? This can apply not just to that, but workplace bullying, anything. Just a very brief touching on that one, more just for next year, what you're going to be encountering. So just basically how to stand up for yourself. And thirdly, just packages, how we can in 21st century accounting help you moving forward. Just some more practical stuff and packages that we've got available for you. Okay, some advanced strategies. Yesterday I showed you some figures and I really want to imprint this into our minds, exactly the difference when you structure yourself properly with your tax and when you don't. So again, look at those figures, $100,000 invested for 10 years at 20%. Look at the difference with that. You've already heard Andrew Baxter speak. You're hearing Troy Beer speak next on Lifestyle Trader. So let's say, for example, that using those strategies you made 20% per annum, take a look at the difference just by structuring in your own name, by using a company, using a trust and a superannuation fund. And eventually, if you become a perpetual traveller, offshore. And the other one is over 20 years, it gets even more. Okay, so 3 keys I just want to introduce you to about asset protection and tax minimisation. Just a few keys which I regard as important. First one is separate business and personal. Now we covered it yesterday, but I really can't stress this enough in keeping separation with your assets. And I want to show you a bit more of the mechanics of why that's important. Let's say you're a pay-as-you-go earner, earning an income. Let's just say that you decide you're going to be buying property and you're going to be buying shares and things like that. So you're going to buy property, shares, and also let's just say that you're going to be doing some contracting or doing business, okay? Now this is quite important because you may not actually be running a business, but if you're a contractor, you effectively are in business. Who here is a contractor, for example, today? A few people? Yeah, quite a few. The moment, as I mentioned yesterday, if you're an employee, you can be sued personally. Who is here remember me saying that? That's a fact. A common law, you can be sued. If you're a contractor, you can be sued as well. Let me give you an example. Let's just say that you contract for a building company, okay? Or contract for anyone. Contract back to your boss, contract back to an oil rig, contract for building. Let's just say that you do some work which is deficient in some way. Let's say you're operating under what your boss tells you to do. The fact is, because you've dealt directly with the client on the matter, and let's say you've got a contract with them as a contractor, you can be personally sued as long as a business. So it's through your structure. Hence, it's very important if you're ever going to be doing any contracting or anything of that kind to make sure you have a structure set up for contracting. Even if it's not going to help you much in tax, which it may not in the beginning stages, it makes a very big difference. Because one thing I want to show you about is how the law works. Let's say that you run your business or you do contracting or do internet marketing or any kind of thing like that through a structure. If you do it in your own name and you get sued, any properties you got in your own name, any assets you've got in your own name are at risk. Let's just say that you do your business through a company, so you contract, okay? This is what happens at law straight away. It's a $2 company, and using the example yesterday, is Ingrid and Sean here? Oh, there you are. Yeah, we used them as an example yesterday. So, who remembers that Sean was the one at risk yesterday? Yes. And Ingrid not so much at risk. Okay, so let's just say that Sean's the director and Ingrid is a shareholder controlling the company, okay? Now, let's just say that there's a lawsuit made, somebody sues the company, okay, for $1 million. Let's just say that for whatever reason insurance doesn't cover it. If there's no assets in the company, how much are we going to be getting? $2. Well, $2 at most. Do you understand that so far? Yeah. So in business, in internet marketing, anything, by using a company, $2 company, straight away, if anyone sues you, nothing to be grabbed. Now, that's stage one. Stage two is that if I'm the lawyer representing people who's suing the company, is to say, okay, can we get Sean personally? Now, understand this, there is a duty of reasonable care and what's called to act for a proper purpose. So let's just say that Sean in his company is shown to not show reasonable care or whatever else, then he might be liable personally. There's two other situations to understand, and this is where people get really caught out with companies. And it's important to understand these provisions if you're going to be doing any kind of business, contracting, internet marketing, anything, to make sure that you get the benefits of your company. So I'd advise you write this down if you're in business contracting or contemplating it. Number one is tax debts. Very important to understand that with tax debts, that in certain situations, that if you don't pay your BAS or your group tax or your pay-as-you-go tax or GST, the tax office can actually make you personally liable by special notice. Okay? So you can be made liable. Can we just get the camera on this? So you can be made personally liable. So tax debts. So number one is be very careful in managing your tax debts, because understanding that it can be made, you can get a notice to be personally liable. The second one is what's called insolvent trading. Anyone heard of that? Now this is one of these ones that is one of the nastiest little bites that can catch you out. Because if as a company you're considered to be in insolvent trading, you can be personally liable for any debts you incurred as a director of a company when it's insolvent trading. Now, what insolvent trading means is that to the eyes of a reasonable person, was the company insolvent at the time? Now, to make it really fun, the test of whether it's insolvent is, was it solvent? a bit of a misnomer, really. But so the question is, a reasonable person looking at the financials, is it solvent? And to make it more complex, the law states that if you don't keep proper records and financials in your company, you're presumed to be insolvent unless you can prove otherwise. Is that scary? Yes. Now, understand it goes a bit further. Recently, a company director was jailed for insolvent trading. You can actually go to jail for it. So, insolvent trading in a less worst case scenario is that you can be made personally liable for the debts. In a slightly worse case scenario, you can have what's called a ASIC civil penalty offence, and in a worst case scenario, it can be jailable. If you acted what was called recklessly or dishonestly in what you were doing, it can be. So it's very important when doing any kind of business or contracting or anything else, that if you actually run into any problems of debt or anything else, that you take steps in some form and you stop incurring debts. Okay? So is that pretty clear? So I wanted to make this pretty clear to make sure that you understand separating business and personal and understanding why companies. Now with trusts, the same kind of deal. Understand of a trust that, as I mentioned yesterday, nobody actually owns the asset, because all the people who are beneficiaries of the trust have got what's called contingent right in the trust, which means that you might get something, you might not. So using Sean and Ingrid as an example again from last night, let's say they have children, which they do, and let's say they make a distribution to their children do have an entitlement for distribution, and that can be grabbed in a lawsuit. However, any money in the trust which hasn't been distributed, that essentially is not available to be taken. So properties, things like that you buy in the trust, capital assets remain safe in the trust. Now, be aware that there is court cases at the moment out right now which have been trying to erode the value of a trust. So it's critical that your pointer clause is spot on the mark, okay? You must take a bit of time. So when you're setting up a trust, that's one of the problems of going, say, online, which some people do, and just setting up a trust without proper advice, is because this is where I believe the next 5 years, a lot of trusts are going to fall down. Because the courts are now starting to show that they don't like the fact that rich people use trusts to keep people away from their assets. And like America now, they're starting to make it a more litigious-friendly society where it's easier and very much in favour to do a lawsuit. So, actually, I was speaking to Rick Otten before, and Rick made an interesting comment, because I know Rick personally quite well. Rick said, the reason why people sue people is when they've got insurance, they get more money. Which is true when you think about it. Lawsuits in America, to give you an idea how bad it's got, the ambulance chasers literally do exist. People who actually make a business making money out of suing people. Because they know how the system works. And once you know how the system works, you know it's very much in favour of people suing other people to get outcomes. So when you're serious about building wealth, and let's just a refresher, who here is serious about building wealth? Yeah, a lot of us. Okay, then we're serious about structuring ourselves properly to make sure that we build a fortress. Really, I say it this way. I was watching with my wife a movie. Who's seen that one about the 300 Spartans, about King Leonidas? Yeah, it's a brilliant movie. After we watched that, my wife said, it's just the same today. It's just the difference is that the Persians of today are the corporate raiders and the big business and the people suing. And it's true. The system today really is very much like that. That you've got the big corporations, you've got the big business, and you've got people who are after your assets. And the moment you start to build wealth and make a difference, it's called tall poppy syndrome in Australia. Anyone heard that expression? If you're just below the breadline or you're just basic and you're keeping your head out of the radar, everyone leaves you alone. The moment you rise your head up and start to make a difference, guess what? People are going to start to target you. You become a target. And I believe lawsuits will increase, not get worse. WA, we had a case about 5-10 years ago where, true story, I had a drunk guy who was drunk in the pub. He went to get his keys, the barman refused to give them to him. The guy basically said, I'll knock your block off if you don't give me your keys. My keys back. So finally the barman gave him the keys. He drove off, smashed his car into a pole because he was drunk, injured himself, sued the pub, sued the barman personally, won the case for giving the keys back. There was another case in New South Wales a number of years ago where a guy broke into he went to a nightclub and the bouncers refused to let him in. He was drunk. He noticed that above the nightclub was a house. The house happened to belong to the manager of the club and the owner. So he managed to climb up the drain pipe or some way and he broke into the manager's house because he thought, I'd get into the club through going through his house. Now, of course, what happens is the manager hears a noise in his house, walks out, and right outside his kids' bedrooms, he sees some drunk guy walking around the house. Now, what do you think he did? A, offer him a cup of tea, or B, clobber him? He just walked up and basically clobbered him. So the guy sued the manager of the club and sued the club for assault and for damages, and guess what? Won the case. And the problem is with lawsuits, you've got to remember this. Courts are looking from someone sitting in an ivory tower who's like 5 years after the event or 3 years after the event. They don't appreciate or have any understanding of the circumstances surrounding it, and they make a judgment, a moralistic judgment, based on an after-event assessment. Who knows it's easy to make an assessment after the event? Correct? Very easy to do so. So understand this. That's why I'm so passionate and so strong about structuring yourself properly, because unfortunately most people find this out when it actually happens. And mostly it's the testimonies and the people who've got stories about how they got sued and lost all their assets and they learnt. I was at Mal Emery's seminar speaking before, and I can remember when I finished, his right-hand man, Ian Marsh, got up and openly said he lost everything in a lawsuit a number of years ago. And he said, unfortunately, he said, if I'd met Warren 7 years ago, he said life would have been a lot easier. But he said, I learned, and I'm now a testimony, and I implore you all to structure properly from the beginning. So, structuring yourself properly gives you a peace of mind that when things go wrong, and if you start to build wealth in business or any kind of investment, the chances are strong that you will face some kind of issue at some stage, and especially moving forward as the laws are diminishing and getting more in favour of lawsuits. So separating business and personal is critical. Keep your assets as separated as possible. Another strategy I just want to quickly show you, in simple terms, this is more for people in business or wanting to build a business. Put your hand up again if you're in or wanting to build a business. Okay, if you're in business or planning to build a business, this is what I call the McDonald's strategy. Because you set up two structures for your business, not one. Okay? You trade through one structure, so all the clients pay you the money, and you license the brand and business premises from the other structure. So you're effectively creating an internal franchise. So to explain it a bit further, let's just say that this structure here owns the business premises, owns the goodwill. Let's say that it's Mortgage Choice, for example, or 21st Century, just use any name that we know well. It's sitting over here, licensed over. Now, if somebody sues the trading vehicle, like let's say that they say your products are faulty, is the brand name at risk and the business premises at risk? No? Would you agree? You understand why? Because think of it this way. Let's just say that, I'll pick on Sean and Ingrid again. Let's say that I'm renting my house to Sean and Ingrid, okay? Or I rent but they're looking for an office or place to do their personal training. They rent my office from me. They then get sued in their business. Am I at risk of losing my office, yes or no? No? Why not? Yeah, it's owned by me. It's got nothing to do. They just go out of business, lose the lease or whatever, but I keep my property. Is that clear? So why can't we do that within our own business? So let's say Sean and Ingrid, with their personal training, if they're planning to build their business and build their branding, they create one structure to own their office premises or lease it or whatever else, to own their brand name for their personal training and lease it back to themselves. Do you see the value of that? This double trust structure then keeps the separation in business. It's a very powerful strategy. I call it McDonald's strategy because do you think that McDonald's keep all their rights to their billion-dollar brand name in the same structure as all their franchisees trade out of? No, they're completely separate. I mean, they keep it all in one vehicle and license it back. I might add, when Price Waterhouse, one of the biggest accounting firms, at a big seminar teaching corporates on this is exactly the strategy they showed the corporates what they should be doing in their business. So you're keeping things separate. What was mentioned there about the bucket company, just for completion, that means having a company underneath your trusts. So that let's say that you're earning a lot of money. Let's say Sean and Ingrid are earning heaps of money and they're both higher than the 30% tax rate. The balance of the money they can just distribute into a bucket company and pay 30% tax. It's called a bucket because it lies there and just receives stuff coming into it, like a bucket. So this is a little bit more advanced, but stuff that if you're in business or you're contemplating business, you really want to be looking at doing from day one. The final thing I'm going to briefly mention here is mortgage and finance trusts. All that is I mentioned yesterday about buying investment properties. You can buy it in a trust, and it's by far my preference that you buy it in a trust. However, let's just say that for negative gearing purposes or whatever else, in your tax situation right now, you end up buying it in your own name, okay? What you can do is you buy it in your own name. Let's say you buy the property for $500,000. Let's say that you've let's just say you're buying that. You've got other properties as well. Let's say you've got only $100,000 debt. You can borrow a further $300,000, effectively over that, gift it into the trust over here, and lend it back. So what you've just done is you've created effectively an extra $300,000 of debt. So what you're doing is one way or the other, whether you buy your property in your own name, or if you've already done that in the past, or buying it in the trust, you can basically secure your assets and make them protected moving forward. Okay? And I just wanted to, again, make that clear and show you that even if right now today you've got properties in your own name, and I gather there's a number of people in that situation, you can do strategies to create a finance trust. As you grow bigger in your wealth empire, this is fantastically powerful stuff. A lot of the bigger clients that we've dealt with, you set up, if you have 4 or 5 different structures, for example, and you have a group finance trust or bank, you can avoid a whole lot of company tax problems which normally people experience. Who's heard of Division 7A in the loan problem of companies? Anyone? Just a few. You can actually avoid a lot of that by having a group finance company set up properly. So this is more advanced. It's really just an introduction, an overview to show you there's so much you can do. Even at a pay-as-you-go level, internet marketing, trading, there's so many little things you can do right from day one that can make a very big difference in your tax if you know what you're doing. And if you can save $5,000 tax in the beginning, is it worth it? Yeah. Remember, every dollar counts. I remember one of my friends who's got a massive net worth. I was out with him once, and it amazed me. He was trying to bargain someone basically in a shop down from $2 to about $1.80. Now, you might say, why would he do that when he's rich? But what it showed me is how much he values every dollar that he has. Now, again, it's really about valuing your money. It's valuing and keeping your tax minimum, doing nothing illegal, nothing stupid, but there's plenty of legal ways you can minimise your tax and protect your assets. Okay. I've mentioned the McDonald's strategy and the finance trusts. Okay, just before I finish and show you the packages, I just want to do a brief introduction as I mentioned about legal rights. See, as well as being passionate about tax and asset protection and structuring yourself, you see, knowing your legal rights, believe me, it makes your life so much easier. Who feels really good when you know the truth about something and you can stand up to yourself? Yeah, no one likes to be bullied, do we? The truth is, Australia is a very bullying nation, really, when you think about our laws and how much laws and rules and how much intimidation takes place. And I know Jamie McIntyre's talked a lot about the convict era and the fact we come from that era. And by knowing your basic rights and knowing you can literally is so important in building net worth. And I've noticed that people who are wealthy, again, have a very good understanding of their basic rights legally. You find people who are wealthy aren't a pushover. And there's two ways we can do it. We can either be like, well, it's not fair, we're getting intimidated, or we can rise up and become empowered ourselves. Which one's a better option? To whinge and complain or rise up and become empowered? And yeah, there's a saying that says you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. You know the truth and it will set you free. And I found that you know the truth in situation, and when someone tries to bully you or intimidate you, it makes no difference. For example, just to give you a few pointers here, voting. I mentioned the other day how the last few elections I just haven't got around to voting. Get my voting fines. All I did was had a look at the law, just had a quick read of the act and what it said, and I noticed there was an exemption. So I wrote to him saying, because I said basically I'm a Christian man, because it said about freedom of religion in there, and I said, and honour God and the Constitution, therefore please waive my fine because I chose to exercise my rights to vote as and when I pleased. And they